All right, guys. We have already looked at a couple of these, but I'm going to review the slides that we have looked at so far just for completion's sake. If you're reviewing this for the test, you'll get an idea of the whole picture instead of having to piece it together. So we are talking about the impact of the Enlightenment and how it affects the next age or the next era. Our agenda, we've already discussed exam results in class, so don't worry about that. We are going to take notes on the Enlightenment, and we're setting up to complete Diderot's Encyclopedia. You'll learn what that is in this activity. I want you to keep in the back of your head, and actually I want you to keep it on the top of your page too, this essential question. What was the impact of the Enlightenment? A lot of you can probably give me small impacts already or small things that happened as a result, but as far as major global events, I want you to be aware of how this fits in the context of history. The Enlightenment did two major things. The first was that it challenged the divine right of kings, the kind of standing order of how kings claim authority and keep authority. Main examples are like Louis XIV and Henry VIII. Those are both divine kings. They claim that they have the authority of God because God is the one who gave them their authority, their power. And secondly, it argues that individuals should have liberty and rights. The word liberty is kind of a overused word in this context of the Enlightenment. We are talking about the ability to make your own decisions. And then rights, things that are going to protect you, things that you can do that the government can't take away from you. All of these thoughts were discussed in arenas like this shown in the picture below. These are what we would call salons. They're not beauty salons. They are actually most of the time people's houses. Sometimes they would be public buildings, but for the most part it was a wealthy person's house who was extremely literate and extremely educated, and they would get together and they would discuss new ideas that were put out by these Enlightenment thinkers. And these ideas were spreading all across Europe at a very fast rate because of these salons. That's a really big catalyst of the Enlightenment. The theories inspired a variety of new ideas in gender, economics, and government. I wanted to repeat that exactly how it's written because it's extremely important that you know those three things are major, major impacts of the Enlightenment. They're not entire eras like our essential question is trying to put out or make you discover, but they are three very important aspects of life that are changed dramatically by the Enlightenment. The first area is economics. One of the most important theorists within the Enlightenment was a guy named Adam Smith. He's a Scottish professor, and he came up with this idea of capitalism. Basically, his theory says that individuals or businesses, private people, should own property and they should also own their means of production. So they should own all of their equipment. They should be able to tell how much of something they want to make, or they should be able to tell what they want to make. No one should tell them, like the government, per se. They also say, or not they, Adam Smith also says that businesses should compete for consumers' money. Competition will create better products, and not only better products, but cheaper products. So if there was only one shoe company, Nike, because obviously they're the best, they could charge whatever they wanted because people need shoes. Whereas if there are 100 different shoe companies, Nike's prices are going to become a little bit more realistic because if they were too high, somebody else would get the sale, basically. So Adidas or Reebok or whoever would get those customers rather than Nike. So this competition will create better goods at lower prices and affect the market. We're going to talk a lot about the market. And Adam Smith wanted a free market, one that is not interfered with by the government. Capitalism itself is an economic model, and it's based on private ownership of property, so what we talked about, individuals and businesses owning their means of production, and the desire to make profits. The example I used in class when we were talking about this was the Monopoly game, because Monopoly is basically a microcosm or a small example of making as much money as you can and owning as much property as you can in order to become more powerful. Okay, the whole point of monopoly is to get all of the money and all of the property. So that's capitalism in a nutshell. And it uses laissez-faire, or this idea that the economy works best when the government is out of there. The government doesn't interfere. So laissez-faire would be translated from French to let it be, or let the economy be, if you're talking about the government. According to Adam Smith, price is always determined by supply and demand. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these individual charts. Hopefully you have these skills already and you know these from Mr. Reynolds' class or from whatever integrated social studies class that you had. But basically, if the demand for a product goes up, then the price can go up. If the supply of a product goes up, then the price can also go up. But when these two intersect, you're going to get a comfortable price to where there's just enough supply and there's just enough demand that is going to keep it in equilibrium. Okay, that's like a term you should know from science. It's going to be in balance. And that equilibrium point is where your price is set. If the price is too high, if, like, let's say Nike puts out a pair of Jordans that are $200, then and nobody buys them, the price will eventually go down. We look at sales. When they have too much of a good and people aren't buying it, they'll tend to cut the price down. And Adam Smith would call this the invisible hand. Okay, it moves the price to the proper point and makes it to where people are willing to pay that and companies are willing to provide it at that same cost. It's all balanced. It's in an equilibrium. Look at this situation, and I want you to pause this video, Mr. Ansel, after you get a chance to listen to me talk about it, and kind of think about your answer, maybe discuss it for 1 or 2 minutes, and then replay. Okay, so Mr. Ansel should be able to help you with this just as well as I would. Situation number 1, the economy has taken a turn for the worse. The president believes the government should get the economy moving again. He wants to pass laws that require individuals and businesses to follow the government's advice about what should be produced. What would Adam Smith say about this situation and why? Pause. Adam Smith would be on the side of relying on the market to improve the economy. Okay? He would prefer that the invisible hand make these adjustments instead of the government, because according to him, a free market would create an equal market, or a market where everybody has the same chance. If the government interferes, they might be tempted to favor some interests over the others. You might be able to think of a real-life situation where this would occur. Think outsourcing or something like that. This could occur where certain people have a better shot than others. Situation number 2. The Save Our Jobs Coalition is working to pass a law that would penalize businesses that move jobs overseas. In addition, the law would require higher taxes to be placed on imported goods that are cheaper than those goods made in the U.S. What would Adam Smith say, and why would he say it? Pause. Adam Smith would favor free trade. Okay, he said that the freer and more general the competition, the better off the public will be. Okay, remember, laissez-faire is the term that we're going to keep using here. Okay, free competition, a free market, no government restrictions. So when trade is restricted, it really helps certain groups over other groups, which is not for the general good. Okay, Smith was opposed to mercantilism because he really wanted everybody to have a fair shot. He didn't want everything to be power-based. He wanted people to have a little bit more freedom and liberty to make money as they chose to. The last situation, situation number 3, Stop Government Now, is a group that believes there is no legitimate role for government except providing for police and fire protection. Members believe almost all government functions should be privatized and run by businesses. What would Adam Smith say here, and why? Pause. Contrary to what most people would think, based on what we know about capitalism, Smith did believe the government should provide more than just police and fire protection. Okay? He supports public works like roads and telephones and waterworks, and he does also support education. He believes over anything, and just like most Enlightenment philosophers believe, the government should provide justice. Without it, there's no really true freedom, and there is just chaos. So even though he does support more than just police and fire, he does not want it to be want the government to be as large as it is today. If we look at something else, not just economics, but we look at all of the new ideas that are spread throughout the Enlightenment, they get spread rapidly through these salons and through writings, but nobody had consolidated them into one place where we can find information. There was no Google. There was no internet. Okay? And there hadn't even been encyclopedias where you could have a question and go and find the answer. So Denise is probably how you pronounce it because he's French, but Diderot is what we'll call him, created the first encyclopedia. Okay? He gathered essays, sketches, ideas from not only politics but also science and even cultural things like the arts, and he created this magnificent work, and we would call that an encyclopedia. These are pretty well known today, but at the time this was pretty groundbreaking. It was definitely a good way to spread ideas. Here's the copy of his book and what might be in there. You see the sketches on the right, descriptions on the left. He also has just not necessarily printed pictures, but just general how-to guides as well. Okay? The encyclopedia was really spreading all of these ideas around. Next is women's rights. We don't get to talk about women's rights too often in this class because most of this class takes place before women really had these, the rights that we would see today. And most of that comes because of the European view of women as being housewives, mothers, and just really not equal to men. And I think you can still see remnants of that in our society, unfortunately. The Enlightenment's not only men in the Enlightenment, but also significant women in the Enlightenment tried to improve the status of women. Madame Goffrin hosted salons. You can see her in this picture here. She spoke her mind openly. Okay, this was not an arena where women could not speak. Remember, they're all about liberty, freedom, rights of individuals. Okay, not just rights of these old white men with wigs. Okay. You also get people like Mary Wollstonecraft, who is from a long line of Wollstonecrafts that would advocate for women's rights throughout history, and we'll learn more about this a little bit later. But she argues for opportunities not only in the professional world, but also for education, because she sees that education is the pathway to a great future. Our next impact comes with political structure, and we're going to talk about kings first and how kingship changes. Remember, the Enlightenment is attacking these absolute monarchs, Louis XIV, Peter the Great. They believed that this absolute monarchy, where you can control everything and you can justify any decision by simply saying that God wills it or that you have the authority of God, that isn't really good for people. That tends to create what we would call a tyrant or a tyrannical situation. This new idea, or this Enlightenment idea, says that the power of the government does not come from God, it comes from the will of the people, or consent of the governed. What that means is that if the people no longer believe a king has their best interest in mind, the people have the right to overthrow that government. Thomas Hobbes is the guy that comes up with this idea, and he calls it his social contract. Okay, there's a contract between society and a king to provide for the good of the good of the people. There's also a change in the relationship between ruler and state. Okay, before, with your absolute monarchs, the citizens only exist so that the state or the government can be better. Okay, let's think ultra-patriotism here. The individuals don't matter, but the country does. And that's sort of an antiquated thought. So it's been a long day, guys. You were here. It's been long. Our new philosophy is that monarchs exist, or the state exists to support citizens. They exist for people, okay? And you can see Frederick the Great saying, a ruler is the first servant of the state, okay? So everybody exists for each other. You do get a couple of monarchs or kings that will attempt to be enlightened or to do things that are for the will of the people. A couple of these, you have Frederick the Great of Prussia. He gives religious freedom, abolishes torture, improves education, yet he still is a pretty overbearing ruler. Okay, Catherine the Great, she wants to protect the rights of her citizens. She just doesn't know how, and she's afraid to let go of that power. So even though she talks a big game, she wants to be enlightened, she still doesn't really do a whole lot for it. Lastly, Joseph of Austria, he does grant a lot of freedoms. He's probably the most enlightened of the monarchs that you see before you. However, after Joseph moves on, passes away, those freedoms are slowly taken away in Austria. So here's our big takeaway, okay? We get revolutions. With the spread of new ideas, people start to question the kings. They start to question the things that have been put around them their whole lives because these new ideas are captivating, they're really intriguing. And so people start to realize they don't have to put up with it anymore, okay? These Enlightenment ideas not only influence people globally, or people in Europe where these salons are located, but they do influence people globally. Okay, colonists, especially in the British colonies, are really interested in these thoughts. Okay, and that's where we're going to lead to the American Revolution from here. Okay. Now that you know this, I sort of gave you a look into the future, a look into what we're doing next. What I want you to do for the rest of today and tomorrow, because I'm not going to be here tomorrow either, and this will be in your sub-plan, I want you to work with a partner. One partner. Not two partners, not three partners. If there is an odd number because someone is absent, then one person is just going to have to work by themselves and hope that they get a partner the next day, because we have 20 people in this class. So it should be even. I want you to work with a partner, and I want you to create an entry into Diderot's encyclopedia. Okay, give me an idea or give me a description of one idea or person in the Enlightenment, and I'll show you some options that you can use. I have a copy of these templates that I want you to do it on. There are not many extras, so maybe make a rough draft on like a sheet of notebook paper and then transfer it to this when you feel like you have everything you need. Okay. I do want it on these specific pages because I'm going to make a little book of Enlightenment thought. When you're finished, I'm going to hang it up in the room. Like I said, I'm going to create a book, so keep it on this page, and be prepared Monday to present on your topic. Okay, it's going to be no more than 2 minutes. Don't add a whole lot of fluff. Don't try to draw all the time out. I want you to tell me what it's about, show me what you got, and show the rest of the class, and then move forward. Okay. Don't worry so much about filling time as presenting information. Here's what the handout looks like in case anybody is looking for it or doesn't know what it's supposed to be. On the top, put your title, try to fill the space evenly, make it look visually pleasing. Write your summary and your explanation in the big box on the left, and then draw a sketch. Because remember, Diderot's encyclopedia showed people exactly what they wanted to know. It didn't just write it out in words. And then at the bottom, put your name so we can give credit to you. I did tell you that I would start providing more rubrics. That was one of the general complaints on our last project. So here is a rubric. It's in box form. If you want to know what a 3 or a 2 looks like, it's somewhere in between a 4 and a 1. Okay, rubrics are pretty subjective. I would assume, or I would operate under the assumption that if you forget one part of a 4, you'll get a 3. If you forget 2 parts of a 4, you'll get a 2. And then I gave you a description of a 1. It's pretty tough to get a 1 if you follow directions. Okay. Make sure it is neat. All the other stuff you can pause here and read. Mr. Ansel can put this on the projector and just keep it paused while you're working so you know exactly how you're going to be graded. But please, please, please be sure that you take your time and you make it neat. Don't just throw something together. You have 1.5 class periods. Here are the things you can choose from. Okay, there's the Enlightenment overall. What was the Enlightenment or the Age of Reason? And you can include the scientific revolution in there from our last notes. You can do causes or reasons for the Enlightenment, and then I give you a long list of Enlightenment philosophers: John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Montesquieu, Rousseau, Voltaire, Smith, Wollstonecraft, Diderot. If you don't want to do an individual person or an overall idea of the Enlightenment, you can talk about the Salon, you can talk about capitalism, or enlightened despots. These are Catherine, Frederick, and Joseph. Okay. If you have any questions, please, please, please email me and ask me, because I won't see you until Monday, but I do expect that these encyclopedias are done by then so that we can move forward and talk about your favorite thing, Murica.